So today we are really going to talk about universal design for learning. And really what we are after is how do we use the principles of universal design for learning to create inclusive experiences for learners with disabilities in low resource settings. And so just to give us the time flow of how we are going to run today's sessions, I will have introductions and the agenda setting for about 10 minutes, which we are doing now. And then we'll go into our panel discussion for 40 minutes. And we hope that you can dedicate around 30 minutes just to hear from you, questions and answer sessions so that we can benefit from the expertise in the room from both the panelists and from you, our esteemed guests. There is a wealth of knowledge here that we honestly look forward to tapping into. And then we will close with a vote of thanks from Mr. Nganga Kibandi from Dignitas. So our panel is comprised of the following speakers. We are joined by Nancy Muni, as she will say hi when her time comes. She's a special needs teacher and the founder of Rare Gem Talent School, and she's also the co-founder of the Dyslexia Organization of Kenya. Margaret Rishi is an inclusive early years education expert who also doubles up as an adjunct lecturer at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. And we'll also be joined by Lilian Agesa, who's an inclusive education specialist with experience working in emergencies, gender inclusion, and child protection. And I am your moderator. My name is Juno Mune, and I am the Grants and Partnerships Manager at Dignitas. But more importantly, I like telling stories and learning, and I'm looking forward to learning with all of you today. Please keep telling us on the chat box who you are, where you're coming from, and the organization that you represent, and we'll be going through a few of you in a short while. We are supported by a very able team of Dignitas colleagues on the background. I'll just ask them to briefly turn on their cameras and say hi to us, the team behind the magic of the webinars. So Julia, Selena, Vicky, Marita, Simon, who am I forgetting? Mercy, all of us, just let's shortly turn on our cameras and wave so that at least I am not alone. I am standing on their shoulders. Thank you very much. And we're looking forward to a very exciting day. So straight on to the background session. Really why we think this is a very apt time to have the conversation around the needs of learners with neurodiversity is the fact that 10% of the world's children have a disability. And in Kenya, our average is more than the global average. 11% of our children have a disability. This is both the ones that we can see and those that are invisible. And recently, there's an increasing awareness of learning, and especially different ways of learning and different types of disabilities, not invisibilities, apologies for that. So, and education systems must then be ready to be able to teach a diverse range of children with disabilities. It's not just business as usual anymore, because the more science is evolving, the more society is evolving, we are discovering a lot more neurodiversity, and therefore our education system must be ready to adapt to those needs. And we also know from research and from implementation practice that when teaching strategies are designed to meet different needs, then all learners will invariably have learning better outcomes. So looking at our work in context of this, in 2023, Dignitas participated in a challenge called the LEAP Challenge, Leveraging Evidence for Action to Promote Change. And the aim for this challenge was to provide key resources to underpin our work, which is focused on the inclusion of marginalized neurodiverse children in Kenya's schools. And so what we worked on then was, how do you understand the learning needs of neurodiverse children and to provide resources that can help teachers, school leaders to be able to support these learners. And so some of the key questions we wanted to answer were the current status of the neurodiverse children in under-resourced settings in Kenya. What are some of those effective instructional strategies that we can use to support them? And what are the mindsets and competencies and practices for school leaders and teachers that can support learning for these children? And how then do school leaders and supervisors better collaborate to promote the inclusion of neurodiverse children within the classroom? So just to give context around what we're talking about when we say neurodiversity, this is what we're talking about. That it covers very many different aspects, and I'm sure from this diagram we can see words that we are familiar with. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, what we call ADHD. We can talk about autism spectrum condition. We can talk about dyslexia, dyscalculia. And these are the combination of skills that they can have or not have, or have at different levels, that really feed into what we're calling neurodiverse, which our panelists will dig deeper into as we proceed in the webinar. And so it's really those undetermined differences of how individuals process information that are natural variations, yeah? A different person will have it different from the next person. While having a learning challenge could be difficult, neurodiverse learners also have very overlapping strengths that we need to tap into. And so what is the role of an educator in making these strengths more widely appreciated, understood, and how do we then use those to help the learner to really thrive in a classroom? Examples of neurodiversity are, like we've seen in the diagram, learning or intellectual developmental disability. We have children with communication disorders, some with autism or the autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and specific learning disorders that will be broken down by some of our speakers. So think about dyslexia, dysgraphia, for example, yeah? And so really the goal is that once we have this conversation, how do we create schools that are vibrant places for children to really gain the skills they need to succeed? Yeah? And so that is our background information. And at this point, I will gladly and quickly move into the main discussion of the day and welcome our first panelist, Margaret Rishu, to just take us through very quickly what UDL is and lay the foundation for us, so that as we continue in the course of the webinar, we're able to really engage and talk and discuss how exactly we can achieve universal design for learning in low resource communities. Over to you, Margaret. And you will allow me to stop share and present the screen for Margaret. Thank you. So, and I can see all of us on the call, Phoebe, Moses, Josephine, each and every one of you, welcome very much. Over to you, Margaret.
Thank you, June. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Margaret Rishu. I've been introduced. And at this point, I want us to think about, before I look at what UDL is, what I have defined it as, I want us to think about maybe that wedding we attended in the village, back in our villages. Maybe there was a couple that had a wedding. And then, of course, during the wedding, you have to eat. There are those who eat chapati, there are those who eat kima, there are those who eat buta, there are those who eat, and the like. So that is how I would liken UDL as a place where children with diverse needs, because the reason as to why they choose different types of food is because we may be having diverse needs. So I was likening UDL to a wedding that we attended in the village, where we were served different types of meals because of our diverse needs. So in a classroom situation, we have different children who have different abilities and different needs. And therefore, as we are bringing in UDL, we are asking ourselves a very, very pertinent question. What is UDL? And that is my first slide. What is UDL? And we are saying that it is a teaching and learning process that is geared towards giving learners equal opportunity. For example, if maybe you're having a physical education activity with learners, you may give them some free time to do what they enjoy most or what they like most. And in so doing, we will have given them an equal opportunity to at least participate in something. Then you're also saying that it caters for diverse needs and abilities as well as interests of each and every learner. It also eliminates unnecessary barriers that may be observed in a classroom situation, for example, curriculum barriers, attitudinal barriers, and the like. And you're also saying it helps accommodate each and every learner, and it also works towards motivating the learner. So then we're also asking ourselves, why UDL? And we are saying that it helps create a positive physical, social, and academic learning environment. We're talking about the physical environment. It may be inside or outside the classroom. That is the specific place where learning is taking place. It could be in the field, it could be on a nature walk, it could be in the classroom. So that is the physical environment. The social environment. The child has to interact with fellow learners. The child has also to interact with the teacher. The child has also to interact with the content. Now, that is how the aspect of the social environment comes in. And then academic environment where we equip learners with knowledge, concepts, skills, attitudes, values, and the like. We're also saying that it enables teachers to understand each learner's ability, interest, and learning style. So we know that learners learn differently using different learning styles. There are those who are visual, they rely more on visual things. There are those who are kinesthetic, they rely more on manipulation, and so on and so forth. So, as teachers, when we use the UDL approach, we'll be able to know what our learners' learning styles are. We're also saying it enables the teacher and learner share learning goals. There's somewhere I used to teach, and in the course of the lesson, we used to write what we are calling now specific learning outcome. At that time, we used to call them objectives. We used to write them at one corner of the blackboard, and then we would review with the learners to see if we have been able to achieve what we had intended for that lesson. So you're saying that through the use of UDL, we can share the learning goals with our learners. And if we do that, they'll be able to appreciate learning. They'll be able to initiate learning themselves. Saying now we are delving now into what guides UDL. UDL is usually guided by three principles. And the first principle is about representation. Representation. I'm not saying them in any order, so there is no one which should come first, which should come second, or which should come third, but I'm just looking at them in a general way. So the first one is presentation, or what we call representation. And this one is concerned on how the teacher is able to equip the learner with the knowledge, concepts, and skills, uh, and also the way in which transfer of learning and at this point, transfer of learning refers to the ability to use any new skill that has been learned in a certain context. So, so how are we now able to use learning and transfer of learning using a variety of channels or mediums? We are saying that in UDL, there is no single means. Whether a learner is a visual learner, whether a learner is a kinesthetic learner, you will find that sometimes they overlap. This time, maybe because of the different lessons and the different subjects that learners are taking, there is not any single means. Another principle is about now engagement, how we are going to engage our learners. How are we going to cause that intrinsic motivation in them for them to be able to undertake the learning process? How are we now going to let play have an opportunity in our lessons? Because through play, children learn a lot, and there is so much that they can be able to engage with. We are also talking about the last but not least principle of UDL is about action and expression. This one is concerned with the task, the authentic task that we give our learners. Do they allow them to use devices and tools? Do they encourage scaffolding? When you talk about scaffolding, is where the learner engages with a more knowledgeable person in the teaching and learning process. We are also asking, do they give us time to anticipate on what is going to happen in the lesson? And if all does not go well, are we going to have now time again to plan on what we had planned on so that we can be able to achieve our specific learning outcome? So, in a nutshell, we are saying that UDL is the teachers intentionally designing the learning environment to reduce barriers so that children can engage in meaningful activities and to avoid situations where we are blaming the learner. We are seeing the learner as the problem, as to the reason as to why we are not achieving our objective. Last but not least, we are saying that through UDL, we can be able to show sensitivity to learners' diversity and therefore be in a position to proactively reduce all the barriers that are there in the teaching and learning process. Thank you.
So at this point, I will want to invite our next speaker just to pivot us into the panel discussion. And I want to take the first question to Nancy. Nancy, you have a wealth of experience supporting learners with dyslexia. So please share with us some of the barriers you've experienced that might affect the implementation of universal design in a classroom, Nancy. One or two or three from your experience.
Oh, thank you very much. One of the greatest barriers that we experience when we are supporting learners with the specifically dyslexia and other neurodiverse, mainly is a lack of awareness of either the parents or the teachers, where you find that the teachers and the parents, because of they don't have awareness, they blame shift. Like I am not supporting as a teacher, we are not supporting the children as it is required. And the teachers also blame the parents that we do not, the teachers are not giving, the parents are not supporting children at home, especially when they have been given homework. That is one reason, like the parents are not aware about their children's disability or had difficulties in learning. And the teachers also sometimes they are not aware that the children that they are handling, they are not having the same ability, where we have high expectation, expecting that all the children are supposed to grasp what they are taught at the same level. That is lack of high expectation of learners who have difficulties. And this means that if we do not give them support, then there is that I would say that barrier. The parents are also not giving, I mean, the parents have difficulties identifying the learners and expecting the parents, the learners to be given support by the teachers that do not have awareness about their disability or their difficulties. We also have the whole general society of the school, where also, especially children with hidden disability, those children with the specific learning difficulties, they do not look like they have any kind of difficulties. And sometimes they have high intelligence in one area, and therefore that leads for high expectation from the people who are taking care of them. The teachers have high expectation of a learner who is able to do mathematics and is not able to read work, is a learner who has high, who is able to work out, draw well, and is performing academically. I mean, co-curriculum activities. They are either performing co-curriculum activities very well, but they have needs when it comes to class in academic areas. So when this kind of a child are performing very well, then the teachers have a high expectation, and they do not understand why this learner is able to perform, has to do work very well, is able to even engage the teachers and children, and they are able to socialize very well, but they have difficulties in when it comes to learning. So I would say that the greatest barrier that could be there is lack of awareness that children, not all children are supposed to perform at the same level. Then the parents also, okay, go ahead.
Yes, so thank you. I think you've done a good job actually setting for us what those barriers are, especially at school level and also at community level. And so at this point, I just want to bring in Lillian and just share with us what you think. How important is community involvement when you think about supporting learners with neurodiversity, and especially in a low resource setting? What is the value of engaging with the community, and how do we start this engagement? What are those things we can start thinking about as good practices for us to do within our communities? Over to you, Lillian.
Thank you, June. And yeah, picking from the conversation, as dignitaries, and I'll give a quick background. We envision as schools as being a vibrant place where children can succeed and also thrive, like you gave us that background. And looking at and considering UDL as a resource, communities are definitely an important resource also in terms of implementing UDL. And therefore, if we were to think about how can we involve the community, because UDL has elements of collaboration, and collaboration begins from capacity. How do you build the capacity of teachers to implement inclusive, lessons or deliver inclusive instructions in their classes? And this is where you think about which kind of collaboration are we talking about? And community collaboration would mean bringing parents on board, bringing instructional leaders on board, bringing, even other actors within the education system, the ecosystem, to ensure that all learners benefit. And the principle behind UDL is that, every learner receives instruction. About collaboration, it would mean how can parents be brought on board to ensure that they're also contributing to the resource. Because UDL, you need a good, you need resources for you to implement UDL within the lessons, for instance, in our school. And this is where you need now parents to come in. How can they play the role in terms of supporting UDL? How can they raise awareness around neurodiverse children in the community? And that collaboration would mean they would support implementation of inclusive education within their community. So I see parents as a great resource. I see community involvement, fostering, inclusion at a wider level, whereby these children also need to be accepted within the school environment. A quick one would be also a contribution from the LEAP findings, where they found that the attitudes of the teacher were also a barrier to teachers being able to deliver lessons that benefit learners with neurodiverse needs. And therefore, how can also the community be involved in supporting teachers to sort of equip them with the right attitudes? Issues around awareness, issues around also bringing the support by, being able to provide resources, like I said, but just being there to support teachers and ensure that they're fully involved in the academics of their children. And this is how a collaboration for UDL would look like. Thanks, back to you, June.
Thank you so much. And I like where you've led the conversation into when we talk about addressing these societal barriers that both you and Nancy have alluded to. We then come to the question of parental engagement. And this has actually been asked by a lot of our participants through the form they had when they were registering. And just to come to you, Margaret, please share with us what are some of those approaches or strategies we can use as school leaders to engage parents. Just give us like very practical examples that you can take away to say, this is how I will work with a parent to be able to support a child with, say, autism or a child with dyslexia. Please, in just a minute or two.
Okay, thank you, June. So, I think, first of all, I think parents are the first teachers to the children. Therefore, they should be part and parcel of the teaching and learning process. A practical example of how parents can be involved in the teaching and learning process, we can invite them in our school for material making days that are going to be used by the children. For example, you realize that children, maybe with autism, love using Play-Doh. So we can mobilize the parents to come with each 2 or 3 tablespoonfuls of flour. And then we prepare the dough that is going to be used by the children in their teaching and learning process. Also, another way is where we can ask parents to donate materials to our school. For example, parents who are tailors, parents who have workshops. You see, when you're talking about learning process, materials don't have to be very expensive.
Nancy, please share with us just around the issue of parental engagement still. What are some of the strategies that have worked for you and your school in terms of breaking down the stigma associated with neurodiversity?
Okay, thank you very much, June. Parent engagement, how we have been, we have worked with the parents. First, as a teacher, I would say that the best thing for a teacher first is to do a basic screening. And the basic screening looks like it is not a very expensive thing, or it is not something that it's out of blue. It's just by like the teacher is giving this support, teaching children at the same, using the same energy, and you find that there are these 2 or 3 children who are not getting what you are or meeting your expectations. And because now you have to work with the parents in a collaborative way to bring in the parents and they discuss that this is what I've been doing and this is what I am observing from the child. Maybe he's not able to get what you are teaching. Probably like he is not writing according to expectation, what you were expecting. If he is not even able to copy from the blackboard, or his ability to hold the pen is or a pencil is different, and also taking care of his books. Those are some of the things that mainly you see with children with specific learning difficulties, that they are having, they are able to do other things, but when it comes to classwork, they are not able to perform according to expectation. So at this moment, it is good to bring in the parents to discuss, instead of having to blame the parents are not able to do this, the children are not getting support from home. And during that time, you will be able to even realize maybe the problem is not in school, or it is not within the child, it could be coming from home. Because also there are some cases where we have children not performing academically because of the challenges that there could be at home. So when you work with the parent collaboratively, you are both working to support the child. So discussing, calling meeting like Margaret has said, having an open discussion within the teachers, your partners, and the parents, and the whole administration. So that is one way that you could support the learners, and in a collaborative way.
Wonderful. And just to now shift the conversation a little bit, I know we've really discussed in detail how we can use different ways to engage our learners. They can express themselves differently. They can share their learning very differently. And so something that a lot of our participants are asking is, when it comes to issues of behavior management, what are those strategies that I can use for learners with neurodiversity in my classroom? And a lot of our questions from our participants are very practical. So we'd love for you to share with us, your case studies or something, examples, practical examples from your experience that we can really just take and run away with when we go back to our schools and to our communities. So how do we deal with the issue of behavior management, especially from a neurodiverse learner perspective? I'll give Lillian the first take, just a minute, and then we'll go to Margaret and then wrap it up with Nancy. So Lillian, over to you.
Thank you, June. And I would base behavior management, classroom management, still to UDL. And some of the principles of UDL, put across is being learner-centered. And therefore, we would speak about strategies that can be used in a general classroom, not necessarily because a classroom has a child with disability, but behind the principles of UDL is that it's a strategy that would benefit all learners. So one of the things that teachers could do in classroom is set up like classroom routines. Classroom routines would mean learners know what they do when, and they know the desired behavior from the teacher. Around that would be like setting up classroom rules and following them. But to go an extra mile, the teacher needs to think, do I have learners that need extra support, even as we have classroom rules that need to be followed? So you will have learners who struggle maybe with following or verbal instructions. So such learners, teachers could come up with pictorial presentations of, like classroom routines. Like they could make pictorial presentations of maybe a routine, like this time we are going for break, or maybe this time we are actually lining up. And teachers could just use small, like, let me put them almost like placards, like flashcards with pictures that would help these learners relate what they see. And mostly this would be like learners who have like ADHD, like attention deficit disorders, and they may not be able to follow like verbal agreements in class. And therefore a teacher could leverage on that. Another thing teachers could do is to actually use the other learners. So peer learning and peer behavior training, where a teacher knows I have specific learners in my class who struggle to follow maybe routines around time. And therefore they would be assigned like a buddy. We call it a buddy system. So a teacher knows that, when we are quiet in class and maybe Mary there will struggle sitting down or sitting sitting still in the desk. So Mary will be sort of paired with another learner who obviously is very good at following instructions and is a typical learner. So you can pair learners with other learners so that they can model the behavior that is desired in class, and you support them to follow that behavior. And still, I would go back to collaboration with parents, because what we desire to see in school should also be reinforced at home. So when you have learners with neurodiverse needs in your class, it's good to also involve parents on behaviors that are being worked on at school. So a class teacher will share maybe what the learner is working on. Like this term, we are working on organization skills. So Mary, John, so and so are working on organizing their books, or rather finishing their assignment. And parents could still receive this information and they can follow up from home to ensure that it is consistent. So those are some of the strategies I would think about right now. Back to you, June.
Wonderful. Nancy, please share your nuggets in under 1 minute, because we have so many interesting questions from our participants, and I would love for us to cover as many of them as we can. Your insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm not going to repeat what Lydian has pointed out, because she has pointed out so much, especially when it comes to a class setup. So to be able to take care of this kind of a child, is the learner or the teacher should break the learning concept into manageable chunks depending on the learning needs of a specific child, and also sitting preferential, using the preferential sitting position, bearing in mind that the learner who could be having visual problem could not sit at the back if he has low vision, and those who have probably partial hearing loss, to sit in a position that they are able to grasp what they are able to do. Also, considering the children with the maybe autism, they are very geared to having materials, and when you're giving them material that they are not, is not their color or the color of their interest, they will look like they will be fidgeting, they will probably bring some kind of disturbance. So when the teacher is also preparing material and distributing material, should be able to think about the child's interest, so that they can give them the material that they are able to they enjoy. Also, when you are starting your lesson as a teacher, keep clear instructions. by example, when you're starting the lesson, after greeting the children, let them know clearly what you want to do or what you're expecting and how you want them to behave in class. Giving example is in the morning, you just stand up and tell them good morning. Today we are going to have this lesson and this is what you need to expect. So when you want to ask a question, if your class rule is to raise up your hand, or however you want it to be, let the children know earlier how they are supposed to behave. Also, let them know when they want to answer questions what they are supposed to do, and also that the learning, as Lydian said, should be centered, child-centered. Let them know that everybody is required to participate, and if it is requiring to participate with the help of the other learner, then that is how you can now bring them the peer learning. So setting clear goals, explaining expectation, sitting position, and considering the material when you are distributing. Over to you, John.
Wonderful. And I think that has been very thoroughly dissected. So Margaret, the question I want to throw to you is around, and it's coming up quite a lot of times, how do we deal as school leaders and teachers with parents who are, just to put it, they're really rushing their child and they don't have the understanding that this learner has, has neurodiversity. And so they're very keen on the child, meeting these milestones, and they want the child to progress really quickly. So what does a school leader do? What does a teacher do in that kind of situation?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think having a child who has a neurodiverse need is not easy for most parents, and therefore it takes time for them to accept, that they go through 5 stages for them to be able now to reach the acceptance stage. Sometimes there is anger, there is denial, there is those 5 stages. So, from my point of view, what I would advise is that the teacher tries to talk to the parents. Sometimes you find that even parents neglect their own children just because they have neurodiverse needs. Therefore, it is important for awareness creation to be there to allow the parents digest that information about the learner. It is also important to offer guidance and counseling as part of the school routine, frequently meeting the parents so that you can be able to uncover what is really going on at home. Because if the child is not well taken care of at home, even at school when they come, they may not be settled. So I think guidance and counseling can be one of the things. I also think that creating awareness about the neurodiverse needs of learners, and also having meetings with the parents, school meetings where you give chances to parents who have children with disabilities to talk to the other parents so that they can build a supportive environment.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so now I'll open it up for around 3 to 4 questions from our participants so that we can address those. I'm sure many of the questions that you shared with us are being answered in the course of the conversations. And my colleagues are also doing a wonderful job on the chat box in terms of addressing some of those questions. This is a good question. What is it? Do we mean that a neurodivergent person is special? Nancy, would you want to take that?
Okay, thank you very much, Lydian. I would want to first of all say what makes somebody special, or what is the difference between a neurodiverse and what you would consider as special. Initially, or what we used to think that children who are special are those children who had visual impairment, hearing impairment, physical disability, and mental or what we call intellectual challenge. But of recent past, we have research saying that those are not the only areas of special need, because we have those who are not able to perform in the same environment, given the same opportunities, but they have something within themselves which is hindering them to perform not just academically or even in areas of sports. That is, they are meeting some difficulties to perform what a learner or a person of their age can do in the same kind of opportunity. So I think, yes, I would say that neurodiverse is, it can also be considered, or it is a special need, which requires some special support and strategic support. But at the moment, when we are talking of UDL, we do not have to think of sophisticated and things, special kind of training to take care of them. We are thinking of using the same environment and giving the learners with neurodiverse accommodation.
Wonderful. The next question that has come up quite a bit is the role of leadership and instructional support. So what exactly should an instructional leader do to ensure that they're implementing universal design in their schools? I'll take this to Lillian.
Thank you, June. When I hear of instructional leadership, I will also link it to the work that we do at Dignitas. So, as I said before, in Dignitas, we also, dream of every child deserving an excellent education. So we work with instructional leaders in areas of instructional leadership, learner engagement, school culture. And when you look at those three areas, it means really instructional leaders have a unique yet very critical role in driving, or fostering inclusion within their schools. So I would say they are actually a key player or key stakeholder in ensuring that inclusion works in their schools. And therefore, the role of an instructional leader, number one, is to ensure that their team, which is mostly the teachers, understand what inclusion is about, and also go beyond and seek to learn about strategies that can be used to, implement inclusion within their schools. So it's important for instructional leaders to actually seek out opportunities for capacity building for their staff to ensure that teachers are able to, receive and handle learners with neurodiverse needs. And as I speak of this, it's important to note that actually learners who have neurodiverse needs have equal opportunities to learn just like any other learner. And therefore, instructional leaders also have a sort of, I would call it a mandate. They are mandated to ensure that actually all learners are learning, and therefore, even when it comes to policy implementation, they play a big role in implementing the government policies that support inclusion. Such like policies include policies like the sector policy for trainees and learners with disabilities, and therefore this policy clearly sets out, and even in the Constitution, that every child has a right to education. Therefore, an instructional leader should ensure that no learner is actually barred from accessing education. And that would mean something really small, like a class teacher or a teacher in class who is refusing to actually handle a learner and saying, I'm not trained in this area. That means instructional leaders have a very big role to play to ensure that inclusion works. And another thing would be instructional leaders have also the role to ensure that they're monitoring, right? So they need to evaluate and see, as I support inclusion in my school, is it working? So they need to take necessary steps to see, are the learners giving the right instruction in class? Are the teachers engaging all learners in class? Do they have strategies that benefit all learners? And UDL is at the center of some of those strategies. Because if you were to link UDL to CBC, really, you would tell that a teacher who is delivering CBC within the current, the current education system, they would not run away from UDL. So instructional leaders, I would say they have that key role to play to ensure that inclusion works and all learners have, an excellent education. Back
Wonderful.
to you, June.
Thank you so much. And I think there's a lot of rich conversations, both in our conversation and even on the chat box. Please have a look there. We're answering a lot of the questions there. And something else that is coming up from the questions that I can see here is the issue around assessment. So being very practical again, because today we are all about, we are going back home with practical take-homes, things we can actually start doing immediately. And so how do I assess a learner with neurodiversity? What are those approaches I can use? I will start with Margaret. and then we'll hear from Nancy on the same. And while that is happening, Nancy, please also think about a response on how do you identify, how do you know that a child has dyslexia, as you'll be answering that one. Over to you, Margaret, in just under a minute.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for the question. We also have hospitals where children are also assessed because we don't have one type of assessment that can be able to classify a child as neurodiverse. They work as a multidisciplinary team, that is medical doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and then they write a report about the child. So there is no one single person who can be able to assess a child. It is a multidisciplinary team, right from the assessment centers in our sub-counties to the hospitals, to the district hospitals. Even at the district hospitals nowadays, children are being assessed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And then we will give Ruth an opportunity to ask her question.
Okay, thank you very much, June. I will still get back to assessment. The person who's done basic assessment or screening would be the parent and the teacher who is handling the children or the child, because if the child is having difficult achieving what their age mate could achieve, given the same opportunity and being in the same environment, probably there could be a reason why you think that as a teacher, this child requires some more screening, and that is now what would advise you as a teacher to send or to call the parents to discuss whether the child requires more assessment, and then you can refer the child to the assessment institution, like what Margaret has just said about it has to be a collaborative, because the doctors or the psychologists will have somewhere to look at, and then also us as the teachers, you're the person who is going to get the recommendation for recommendation that you're going to work with the child. So as collaborative as it is important to make sure that we are doing it from the point of information, and what informs us is the way we are interacting with the child. The other question you asked me is about how a teacher, or how can you identify a learner with dyslexia? Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay. A learner with dyslexia, it is very early to say that a learner has dyslexia just because he is not able to read and write, and especially in kindergarten. So a learner with a learner with dyslexia will be better or be settled for assessment when he or she has gone to school for over more than 2 years. And this is because dyslexia is a learning condition which inhibits a child from reading, writing, spelling, and sometimes information processing. It is neurobiological in origin. That means it could be inherited, or there are other developmental conditions that would make the child look like he has dyslexia. So it is inherited, and therefore it is very hard to be able to know by just look at it. And then it is not a question of intellectual challenge, that the child with dyslexia may not have any intellect question that concern that the teacher or the parent could be saying that this looks like he is not he has intellectual challenge. So it becomes a little bit confusing, because it is basically, it is so specific. It is reading, writing, spelling, and interacting with the with what information processing. So the learner will have difficulty in reading what their counterpart can be able to read in grade level. They are laboring in reading. Even if they could be reading, you find that they are not having reading fluently like other children, or sometimes in a severe case they are not able to blend words or read fluently. They may also have difficult sweating, avoiding reading, avoiding anything avoiding to write, and they look like they are in so much, they are tensing when they are given any reading and writing material. And when you move them to another activity, you find like they have found some kind of joy, because that is where they excel. So in a nutshell, that is what dyslexia is.
Thank you. Very, very informative. And from what I can get from Margaret and Nancy, how to identify a learner is something that is done in a very holistic way, so that it can happen at 3 levels. This, you could do an initial assessment at school by observing the characteristics Nancy is alluding to. They're not able to blend words, they have some difficulty reading, they're laboring. But once you identify this as a teacher, what is the next step you can take? Because at that point, you possibly just have a suspicion. Then Margaret now comes in and tells us, we have EACs in different sub-counties. So EACs are the Education Assessment and Resource Commit Centers. The child can be taken there for a proper assessment as to their ability, the extent of which they're able to learn. Also means they also have to be taken to a doctor so that they're able to be properly assessed. And so this holistic approach is what will make us come to the appropriate conclusion on how best to be able to support that child. Another question that came out a lot from our participants was, what is the place of differentiated instruction when you look at it in the context of UDL? And maybe I'll give each of you a minute to speak this and tell us how those two either merge or diverge, so that we can get practical, experiences of how we can combine the two for the benefit of the learner. We will start with Lillian, and then Margaret, and then wrap it up with Nancy. A minute to pass.
Thank you, June. Yeah, it's important to also question ourselves, where's the role of UDL in also driving inclusion. The role of differentiated instruction. I would put it like this, that both strategies are actually very important in implementing inclusive education. Maybe the main difference, I would relate it to how the teacher maybe delivers or plans. When it comes to differentiated instruction, we know that the elements, or rather for those of us who might not know, differentiated instruction is where the teacher tailors the instruction in different aspects. The teacher will tailor how the process looks. The process is how the teacher is delivering the content. So yeah, the teacher in differentiated instruction, the teacher will differentiate the learning environment. It doesn't really mean that the learning environment should always be in class. So it means the teacher can go out of their way and make learning more engaging in different ways. It could be learners are in class, but they are participating in small groups. It could be learners are in class, but some are seated in a corner doing something like a project together. Another learner is learning individually because that's how they learn best. But also the teacher differentiates the product, and that means how the teacher assesses learning. And we've just heard about learners with dyslexia and some who might actually struggle with writing. So when you're differentiating, the teacher could give such learners a task that doesn't really involve writing. The teacher could ask the learner to maybe narrate what they have learned out of a topic, or maybe make a poem out of it, or maybe role play what they have learned from a topic. Like maybe, let me give an example. The teacher was delivering a CRE topic on a story in the Bible. Instead of the teacher doing a written assessment for such learners, the teacher plans to actually ask the learners to even role play the story in the Bible, and maybe now verbally express what they have learned from the story, while other learners might draw the story to demonstrate that they have actually comprehended the story. Another learner will answer a written test. So when it comes to differentiated instruction, more of the teacher thinks of the specific learners in their class when the teacher is lesson planning or preparing for the lesson. But universal design for learning, basically the teacher looks at a number of strategies that benefits everyone in the class. So this time around, the teacher knows I have different learners in my class. Some are visual, some are kinesthetic, some are tactile. Some learn well in groups, others learn well independent learning. So they are like solitary learners. The teachers that in my class, not all learners will do a written test. So the teacher will put in a number of different strategies when it comes to UDL, while focusing on all learners. At the back of his mind, he knows I have a few of these learners who will actually enjoy this more, but it's for the benefit of everyone. While DI is focused on the specific learners who are in your class, where the teacher even knows during this time, I'll pull out Mary to actually get a break, because Mary might be a child with autism, and therefore they're not able to sit throughout a 35-minute lesson. So the teacher will differentiate the environment by pulling Mary out to assign Mary an activity outside the class or have him play with other manipulatives somewhere in the class. So that's the main difference, and how I look at it, that UDL is meant to benefit all learners, and it's a strategy that is brought to class without necessarily handpicking out specific learners. While BI, the teacher has to give a very intentional thought on how specific learners will benefit from a lesson. Back to you, John.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just have under 8 minutes left for this Q&A session. So Margaret and Nancy, 1 minute each to respond to this question so that we can then do the final round of take-homes from you. Nancy, please share with us your insights.
Okay, thank you very much. I would try to bring it in a kind of our setup, what we do about differentiated instruction. We have learners with these different abilities, like there are those who can be able to read, there are those who can be able to, who are not able to read at their grade level. So in a setup, in a class like ours, where what we do with the, in terms of IDL first, the teachers have to be aware of the learners that he or she is handling in class, and they also know their ability. The teachers have to have the every other learner in their mind when they are planning, and when they are drawing out their objectives, they have to have objective for each and every learner, and it doesn't have to be the same because of their different need, but then the subject should be the same. And when you are doing the subject, to say, like if I give example, during my home science lesson, we were learning about how to oral taking care of our teeth. So I'll give example, I'll give the learners who are high achievers questions after explaining. I'll give them questions to read and write. And those who cannot be able to do the same, I'll give them an opportunity to answer the questions orally. And those who cannot be able to even read and, to write, I may draw the tooth for them, and then they will color. So in this case is that all of my students have learned about oral, taking care of our teeth, and we are using the same time. And so when the learners, if I have a distractive learner, I'll make sure that I've given him some, maybe more material depending on his interest. So that way, everyone is learning the same concept, but according to their ability. So that is what is differentiated instruction is for me. Yeah. Over to you, John.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And as we come to the almost end, Margaret, final thoughts on UDL and differentiated instruction.
Thank you so much. For me, UDL is where the teacher creates a learning environment that is accessible, that is inclusive, that is equitable, and that is challenging for all the learners. That is, all our children have equal chances of accessing education or the teaching and learning process. Unlike in differentiated instruction, where you plan for a specific learner using specific resources, using specific strategies, using specific assessment methods. So that for me would be one difference. The next difference is that in UDL, we don't see the learner as the one having the problem. We don't situate the problem to the learner. Neither do we situate the problem to the teacher. We situate the problem to the barriers that are there in the environment that may impede learning. Thank you.
What a wonderful way to close out that conversation. That really UDL is about creating opportunities for every learner to have accessible, inclusive, equitable, and learning that is challenging to their capabilities and abilities, and that we're situating the problem as the barriers as the problem and not the teacher nor the learner. And I like what has also been said by Lillian and Nancy, that you're really thinking about UDL as an approach that works for all students, regardless of their neurodiversity or their ability. While in differentiated learning, you're really drilling down on those learners based on the context that need a bit of very personalized learning. But UDL is really just diversifying the approaches to teaching and learning so that all children can be able to enjoy learning in the ways that they learn different. So as a way to wrap up this beautiful conversation that we've had for the last 1.5 hours, I want our panelists to give us parting shots so that we can go into thanks. Keep sharing your comments on the chat box. Thank you very much, Redempta. Very practical tips for behavior management. And I'm seeing a lot of us alluding to the fact that collaboration is really key when it comes to universal design for learning in our context. And that ultimately, we also have to look at the multidisciplinary approach around issues around assessment. And that's the only way we'll be able to really, truly help our children. Thank you so much for your comments on the chat. They've been very, very useful. They're feeding into the conversation. So in closing, what I would want to ask each of our panelists is a different question to give us as parting shots. And so for Lillian, we want to find out really, how can we better enhance the ways that we collaborate as educators? Whether I'm a teacher, I am working within the education system, I'm a policymaker, I'm a school owner. How can we improve the way we collaborate? Practical tips that we can go back home and do so that we really integrate UDL for our learners in our settings. And then for Margaret, you'll please share with us, what are those 1 or 2 indicators that for you show that you're succeeding in implementing UDL in low resource settings? And then finally, for Nancy, tell us what advice you'd give to an educator who is just starting to explore universal design for learning in their teaching practices. What are those things that they can do, that they should look out for? Maybe 1 or 2 mindsets that they should have. We start with Lillian.
Okay, thanks. I'll connect this to the LEAP project. And one of the things that Dignitas sought to understand is the current status of inclusion of neurodiverse learners in the education system. But also Dignitas wanted to see how can collaboration between teachers, instructional leaders, and even the government contribute towards the inclusion of learners with neurodiverse needs. We also looked out for strategies. So I think that's one key area. Like now for us, the actors in the field of education, it's important for us to know that as much as we want to impact schools, and we've been doing it while working closely with the instructional leaders in the area of learner engagement and school culture, inclusion should be one of our most important agenda, and ensuring that all learners benefit from our strategies. So it's important for us to position ourselves in a way that we are benefiting all learners. And looking at UDL as a principle, it's something that for us Dignitas, we would pick it up and ensure that now we can embed UDL into our teacher practices. Talking about community involvement, it will be important that instructional leaders, or what they call school administrators, like the head teachers, they should actually ensure that awareness is also a priority in their schools. I would like to link UDL to CBC, and I say they share a lot of commonalities. And that's why we think that UDL is a great opportunity. We look at it as an opportunity for growth in terms of how we implement CBC. Therefore, schools should look out into closely collaborating with parents through awareness. There are some parents who are not supporting schools, not because they don't want to, but there's a big knowledge gap. So schools to reach out to parents and explain to parents how neurodiverse learners are supposed to be supported in their schools, and explain to parents their role. I believe that if parents know their role, they would also look out to support the learning of their children. My last point would be around how do we look at CBC in terms of positioning CBC in low resource settings. So because we are connecting UDL to CBC, it would be important for us to ask ourselves what kind of resources are available to implement CBC, or rather now to see which strategies can work that ensure that neurodiverse learners are well incorporated into the learning. So some of the things that I feel like we cannot leave it out is resources that are digital tools. It's important for instructional leaders to also look out for digital resources that would benefit all learners in the class. And of course, with an extra focus on learners with neurodiverse needs, many of them learn well when information is presented in audiovisual forms. And looking at the opportunities that are out there, I know many schools are now aligning, getting digital tools like phones. And even in a school where there's only 3 smartphones, or maybe only 3 teachers have smartphones, how can we make use of that resource to benefit more lessons that are taking place in the school? Let's have that thought beyond what can we use what we have, even in delivering virtual resources to our learners. Back to you, June.
Thank you so much. Margaret, tell us 1 or 2 ways that we can that we can know that you're succeeding in UDL. What are some of those things to look out for in my school, in my teachers, in my learners, to know that I'm succeeding at implementing UDL?
Thank you, June. For me, if I worked in a classroom, because I'm a teacher, and I find learners who are motivated, learners who feel appreciated, learners who are ready to learn, learners who are willing to take risks, learners who are going beyond what we have learned in class and came up with new ideas and innovations, that would be a wow for me as UDL is working. Number 2, when I am with my teachers, what are we discussing? Are we discussing the barriers, or are we discussing learners? If I am in a place where teachers are discussing the barriers that are associated with learning and how we can overcome them, that would be a wow for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Nancy, tell us your words of wisdom for a teacher just beginning their journey towards inclusion, towards universal design.
Well, thank you very much, June. My advice to the teacher would be acquiring knowledge about different neurodiverse needs that we have. Knowledge is power. When you know why, to get how might not be very difficult because you already have the answer. So the first question I would ask the teachers is to know or to get knowledge about why would the child not be able to perform according to your expectation. Remember, the teachers would be putting so much effort, and then the effort they are doing is not reciprocated by the results that they are seeing. So ask yourself why, and then when you have how, I would say that it will be very easy to interact with the materials that are available. You'll be also be motivated to work with the materials that are within the environment, and also to use the technology in the right way, rather than maybe you have a smartphone as a teacher and then you are using it for TikTok and other things, rather than using for the learning. So in working also with the people who are collaborating, maybe there are some teachers who are in your school setup who are knowledgeable about neurodiverse. So collaborating, team working is also very, very important. And always seek to know, and don't fear to ask questions. And when you don't fear to ask questions as a teacher, you are able to work with the parents and the community and the administration. And seeking more knowledge is also looking for the policies, like Lydian had said, the right policies that are set aside for supporting these learners. And finally, you become motivated, you will seek, and there is so much information nowadays in the social media, in the internet about the neurodiverse. Therefore, you don't have to go to college. And going to college is okay, but you still can learn from within and be able to support the learners. And when you know why it's not so difficult, you will plan for it.
Wonderful. So 3 things I'm getting from these parting shots. We need to do a lot more awareness raising in our communities, and we need to really work together to maximize our resources. And how we know that we're succeeding is that our learners are actually excited about learning, they feel appreciated, and they're feeling confident in their abilities, regardless of their diversity, of their ability. And we also have the idea that for us to really succeed in this noble work, the first point of call is that we have to gain knowledge, and we really have to work together as a team so that we achieve success. Thank you so much for all these wonderful insights. In case you want to learn more about the LEAP project that Dignitas worked on, my colleagues have shared the link on the chat box, and you can always go there to get an in-depth understanding of the same. Victoria, please share that again. But at this point, we're just under 1 minute to time, and I'd like to invite Mr. Nganga Kibandi, our Programs and Advocacy Director from Dignitas, to share with us his takeaways from today's session. Thank you so much. Nganga, over to you.
Thank you, June. This has been very, very enlightening. I want to give a special appreciation to Nancy Mooney and Margaret Risho and Lillian, I guess, for really sharing such insightful thoughts and deep insights around this conversation, which can often be very difficult to interpret. It's been really nice to see a number of people who've joined in, some of them who are known to us, and we know they have a very strong interest in this particular topic. Would love to see their contribution even in chat. And this would love to continue having this conversation. So this is just the beginning of the journey of unpacking some of these issues that many of us struggle with in our own in our schools, in our classrooms, sometimes even leaving us feeling like we are very helpless. So thank you for your insights, Nancy and Margaret and Lillian. This has really been helpful in unpacking some of these issues. We'd love to continue this conversation with you. We'd love to hear those of you who would want to contribute a little more to this conversation to unpack some of these issues or even share some resources. An email will be shared on the chat for you to be able to share that with us. But thank you all for sparing your time and joining us. We are over 100 and with an average 130 to 150 of us. This speaks volumes in terms of our commitment to the children we dearly love and just our commitment to ensuring that no child is left behind. So thank you all, and we look forward to having you in our next meeting. Back to you, John, for our final closing.
Thank you very much, Nganga. Actually, that was the only closing, and thank you very much for doing that for us. Thank you to the team behind the scenes. We've done a wonderful, wonderful job, and we appreciate you, even though you do not want us to see your faces. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. See you on the next webinar. Bye-bye.